Victoria Sterling has built a pharmaceutical empire by controlling every variable, every outcome, every human emotion in the boardroom. She's never met a problem she couldn't solve with strategy and steel determination. But when her private jet makes an emergency landing in Millbrook, Kansas, during a fierce thunderstorm, she encounters something her MBA never prepared her for. A widowed mechanic whose quiet strength will shatter every rule she's lived by. If you enjoy stories like this, feel free to subscribe. It really helps the channel. By the way, let me know in the comments. Where are you listening from? None of them knew that a crumpled medical bill left on a diner counter would soon change everything. Victoria adjusted her Hermes watch for the third time in 10 minutes. Watching lightning split the Kansas sky through the small aircraft window. The quarterly board meeting in Chicago had run late, but weather was just another variable to control. She'd built Sterling Pharmaceuticals from nothing into a billion-dollar empire by refusing to let obstacles derail her plans. "Miss Sterling, we need to make an emergency landing," Captain Reynolds announced, his voice tight with concern. "Severe storm system ahead, and we've got engine trouble." Victoria's fingers froze over her laptop keyboard. In 15 years of corporate leadership, she'd never encountered a problem money and strategy couldn't solve. But as the plane bucked through turbulent air toward an impossibly tiny airstrip, she felt something foreign. Uncertainty. The landing jolted her from her seat. Through rain-streaked windows, she saw a weathered hangar with a flickering sign. Millbrook Regional Airport. The storm made it impossible to see beyond 20 feet. Victoria gathered her briefcase and stepped into humid Kansas air, her Italian heels immediately sinking into soft ground. "You folks okay?" A man emerged from the hangar, wiping grease-stained hands on a rag. He was tall, late 30s, with the quiet strength that came from years of honest work. His jeans were faded but clean, flannel shirt rolled up to reveal forearms that spoke of capability. "I'm Jake Morrison. Heard you coming through the storm." Victoria extended her hand with practiced confidence. "Victoria Sterling. My pilot says we have engine trouble." Jake's handshake was firm but brief, his attention already shifting to the aircraft. "Let me take a look." As he moved toward the plane, Victoria noticed a small figure in the hangar's corner, a girl, maybe 8, sitting at a makeshift desk with books spread around her. "Emma, sweetheart, stay warm inside," Jake called softly. Victoria approached, expecting to see typical children's coloring books. Instead, the girl was studying detailed medical diagrams, her small fingers tracing anatomical drawings of hearts with unusual precision. That's quite advanced reading for someone your age," Victoria said, genuinely curious. Emma looked up with serious dark eyes that seemed too old for her face. "I like understanding how hearts work. Mine doesn't work like other people's hearts do." Before Victoria could respond, Emma's colored pencil slipped from her fingers. The girl's face went pale, and she swayed dangerously. Jake was beside her instantly, catching her as she collapsed against the chair. "Not tonight, sweetheart. Please, not tonight," he whispered, his calm exterior cracking to reveal raw terror underneath. Victoria watched Jake's mechanic hands shake as he checked Emma's pulse, his confidence replaced by a father's desperate fear. The storm outside seemed insignificant compared to this crisis. Without thinking, Victoria moved toward them, her corporate instincts shifting into something unfamiliar, the need to help, not for profit, but because a child was in danger. "We need to get her to a hospital," Victoria heard herself saying with unexpected authority. Jake looked up, surprise flickering across his features. "Nearest hospital is 20 minutes away, and my truck won't start in this weather." I have a rental car. The words escaped before Victoria fully processed them. She should be managing communications with her board, not involving herself in strangers' emergencies. But Emma's small hand, reaching weakly toward her father, made every corporate rule seem suddenly irrelevant. The drive to Millbrook General Hospital was silent, except for Emma's labored breathing and Jake's whispered reassurances. Victoria gripped the wheel, navigating unfamiliar roads through sheets of rain while stealing glances at Jake holding his daughter against his chest, his lips moving in what might have been prayer. At the hospital, Victoria found herself in a sterile waiting room that smelled of disinfectant and broken dreams. She should have called her assistant, arranged alternative transportation to Chicago. Instead, she sat beside Jake on uncomfortable plastic chairs, watching him fill out insurance forms with hands that still trembled. She was born with a congenital heart defect, Jake explained quietly, not looking up from paperwork. Doctors say she needs surgery, but insurance only covers part of it. Victoria had spent years in boardrooms where millions were discussed like weather reports. The number on Jake's estimate was less than her last handbag cost. But watching him calculate payment options with desperate precision, she understood that for this man, it might as well have been impossible. Her phone buzzed insistently. Assistant, board members, stockholders demanding attention. Victoria glanced at Jake, now on his own phone, voice carefully controlled as he spoke about payment plans he clearly couldn't manage. She found herself reaching for her checkbook, then stopped cold. She was about to break her cardinal rule: never get emotionally involved in business decisions. The waiting stretched past midnight. Victoria called her assistant, postponing morning meetings with vague explanations about weather delays. At 3 a.m., with Emma stable but requiring observation, Jake suggested the only open place in town, Rosie's all-night diner. The diner was a time capsule of red vinyl booths and chrome fixtures, with coffee that could wake the dead. Rosie, a woman in her 60s with kind eyes and flour-dusted apron, served them without questions, somehow understanding they needed quiet space to process the night's events. "I lost my wife 2 years ago," Jake said suddenly, staring into his coffee cup. "Car accident on Highway 50. Emma was 6, barely understood why Mommy wasn't coming home. The heart condition got worse after that. Stress, the doctors said." Victoria felt an unexpected tightness in her chest. "I'm sorry. That must have been devastating." "Sarah made me promise something before she died," Jake continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "She said Emma would need more than just medical care. She'd need people who genuinely cared, not just doctors doing their jobs." He looked up at Victoria with eyes that had seen too much loss. "Tonight, watching you help us, Sarah would have liked that." Victoria found herself sharing things she'd never told anyone in boardrooms. Her childhood in Detroit, parents who worked 3 jobs each but still lost their house, building walls to protect herself, climbing corporate ladders by never showing weakness or sentiment. "I learned early that caring too much makes you vulnerable," she admitted. "And what's wrong with being vulnerable?" Jake asked simply. Before Victoria could answer, her phone rang. The caller ID made her stomach drop, her head of legal affairs. "I have to take this." She stepped outside into the pre-dawn air, listening to her lawyer's urgent voice. "Victoria, we have a problem. The Millbrook community is organizing protests against our pricing on pediatric medications. Someone leaked internal documents about profit margins. The board is demanding immediate damage control." Victoria's blood ran cold. "What medications specifically?" "The new heart treatment protocol for children. The one we're pricing at $40,000 per month. Victoria felt the world tilt. She looked through the diner window at Jake, who was watching her with growing concern. Emma's experimental treatment, the one that could save her life, was manufactured by Sterling Pharmaceuticals, and Victoria had just spent the evening falling for a man whose daughter needed medication her own company was pricing beyond his reach. Victoria walked back into the diner, her face pale from the phone call. Jake looked up from his coffee, immediately sensing something had changed. "Everything all right?" "I need to tell you something," Victoria began, but her phone rang again, her assistant with flight arrangements. She declined the call, but Jake had already seen the shift in her demeanor. "You should go," Jake said quietly. "Whatever business emergency you're dealing with, it's probably more important than sitting in a small-town diner with strangers." Victoria wanted to explain, to tell him about the devastating connection she'd just discovered, but her corporate training kicked in. Damage control, protect the company, minimize liability. "You're right. I should get back to Chicago." She left money on the table and walked out, feeling Jake's confused gaze burning into her back. The betrayal would come soon enough when he learned the truth about her company's pricing. Better to leave now before she made things worse. 2 days later, Victoria sat in her Chicago penthouse office, staring at Emma's medical file her legal team had compiled. The 8-year-old needed Sterling Pharmaceuticals' newest cardiac treatment, a medication that cost $47 to manufacture, but was priced at $1,200 per dose. Emma would need it twice daily for the rest of her life. Her assistant buzzed in. "Ms. Sterling, there's a town meeting in Millbrook tonight. Local news is covering it. The community is organizing protests against our pricing practices." Victoria pulled up the live stream on her laptop. The Millbrook Community Center was packed with families holding signs reading "Medications, not profits," and "Children's lives matter more than stock prices." Her heart stopped when she saw Jake at the podium. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said, his voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "I'm a mechanic, a single father, and I'm here because my 8-year-old daughter is going to die unless she gets medication that costs more than I make in 6 months." Victoria watched in horror as Jake held up a stack of medical bills. "Sterling Pharmaceuticals has a treatment that could save Emma's life. They charge $1,200 per dose. Medication my daughter needs twice daily. That's over $800,000 per year for a drug that keeps children's hearts beating." The crowd erupted in angry murmurs. Jake continued, "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for basic human decency. How do we live in a world where corporations profit from children's suffering?" Victoria's chest tightened as Jake's words hit their mark. She'd built her empire by viewing everything through profit margins and market strategies. Sitting in her glass office tower, she'd never had to look into the eyes of families who couldn't afford her company's products. "We need to make our voices heard," Jake said. "Sterling Pharmaceuticals needs to know that behind every price tag is a human being, a family, a future hanging in the balance." Victoria closed the laptop, her hands shaking. She'd never seen herself as the villain in anyone's story, but Jake's passionate speech made her realize that's exactly what she'd become. Her phone rang, the board demanding an immediate response to the growing protests. Instead of answering, Victoria grabbed her keys and drove toward the airport. She had to face this crisis in person, had to look Jake in the eye and somehow explain the impossible position she'd found herself in. The Millbrook Community Center was emptying when Victoria arrived. She sat in her rental car, watching families file out with defeat etched on their faces. Jake emerged last, carrying a box of leftover flyers. Emma walking slowly beside him with a small oxygen tank. Victoria got out of the car, her designer heels clicking on the asphalt. Jake froze when he saw her, his expression shifting from surprise to something darker, understanding. "You're Victoria Sterling," he said, not a question but an accusation. "Sterling Pharmaceuticals, the company I was just speaking about." "Jake, I can explain." "Explain what?" His voice was deadly quiet, the kind of calm that preceded storms. "Explain how you sat in that diner listening to me talk about my daughter's medical bills while knowing your company owns the patent on her treatment. Explain how you pretended to care?" Emma tugged on Jake's sleeve, confused by the tension. "Daddy, this is the nice lady from the airport. Why are you upset?" Victoria knelt down to Emma's level, her heart breaking at the trust in the child's eyes. "Hello, sweetheart. How are you feeling?" "Better. Thank you for asking. Daddy says you had to go back to work, but I hoped you'd visit again." Jake gently moved Emma behind him. "Go wait in the truck, honey. The adults need to talk." Once Emma was out of earshot, Jake's composure cracked. "Did you come here to gather intelligence? See how the locals were responding to your pricing policies? Was befriending my daughter part of some corporate strategy?" "No, Jake, it wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He stepped closer, his voice rising. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a billionaire CEO manipulated a desperate father and his sick daughter for her own purposes." Victoria felt tears threatening, something that hadn't happened in a boardroom in 15 years. "I didn't know about the connection when I met you. I found out during that phone call at the diner. And instead of telling me the truth, you ran." Jake shook his head bitterly. "You know what the worst part is? Emma asked about you every day. She wanted to know when the nice lady was coming back. I had to tell her that some people only pretend to care." The words hit Victoria like physical blows. She'd spent years building emotional walls, protecting herself from exactly this kind of pain. But watching Jake's devastation and knowing she'd caused it was unbearable. "Jake, please." "Please what?" "Please forgive you for building your fortune on my daughter's suffering. Please understand that business is business." He pulled out a crumpled medical bill from his pocket and threw it at her feet. "This is what your market realities look like in the real world." Victoria stared at the bill, seeing Emma's name written in careful handwriting next to impossible numbers. For the first time in her corporate career, she couldn't think of a single business justification that mattered more than the devastation in Jake's eyes. Sunday morning found Victoria sitting in the back pew of Millbrook Methodist Church, hoping for some kind of clarity or absolution. She'd hardly slept, replaying her confrontation with Jake over and over. The congregation was small but warm, with families who'd probably attended this church for generations. Reverend Thomas was a gentleman in his 60s who spoke about forgiveness and second chances. When he asked for prayer requests, several hands went up. Victoria was surprised when Emma raised her small hand from the third row. "I'd like prayers for Miss Victoria," Emma said in her clear, innocent voice. "She seemed really sad when she talked to Daddy, and I think she needs friends." Victoria felt every eye in the church turn toward her. Jake's jaw tightened, but he didn't contradict his daughter. Reverend Thomas smiled kindly at Victoria. "Would you like to share what's on your heart, Miss Victoria?" Victoria found herself standing on unsteady legs. "I'm not sure I belong here. I've spent my career making decisions that I thought were necessary for business, but I'm starting to realize those decisions have real consequences for real people." The congregation listened with the patience of people who'd heard their share of confessions and struggles. Victoria continued, "I've built walls around my heart to protect myself, but those same walls have kept me from seeing the damage I was causing to families like yours." "What kind of work do you do, dear?" asked an elderly woman from the front row. "I run a pharmaceutical company. We make medications that people need to live, but we price them based on what the market will bear, not what families can afford." Murmurs rippled through the congregation. Victoria saw recognition dawn on several faces. Her company's pricing policies had affected more than just Emma's family. "I don't know how to fix the systems I've helped create," Victoria admitted, her voice breaking slightly. "But I know I can't keep living with the knowledge that my success comes at the cost of children's lives." Reverend Thomas nodded thoughtfully. "Sometimes the first step toward healing is simply acknowledging the harm we've caused. Are you willing to seek a different path?" Victoria was about to answer when her phone buzzed with an urgent text from her assistant. "Board calling emergency meeting. Return immediately or they'll question your leadership competence. Emma Morrison's treatment approval being delayed indefinitely pending review." Victoria stared at the message, feeling the weight of an impossible choice settling on her shoulders. If she stayed to make things right with Jake and Emma, she risked losing her position and any power to help them. If she returned to defend her leadership, Emma's treatment would be postponed, possibly forever. She looked up to find Jake watching her, having seen the expression on her face change. In his eyes, she saw the exact moment he realized that once again, her corporate responsibilities were pulling her away from his family's crisis. Victoria excused herself from the church and walked outside, her hands trembling as she called her assistant back. "Tell the board I'll be there tomorrow morning. And get me everything on Emma Morrison's case. Medical records, treatment protocols, everything." She hung up and found Jake waiting by her car, his face a mask of controlled anger. "Let me guess. Corporate emergency?" "Jake, I know how this looks. It looks like you're abandoning my daughter. Again." His voice was steady, but Victoria could hear the exhaustion underneath. "Emma asked me this morning if you were coming to church. I told her probably not, that you had more important things to do." "She is the most important thing," Victoria said fiercely, surprising them both with her intensity. "But if I lose my position, I lose any power to help her. The board is threatening to delay her treatment approval indefinitely." Jake stared at her for a long moment. "So you're choosing your job over my daughter's life?" "I'm choosing the only way I can save her." Victoria felt tears she'd held back for years finally spilling over. "If I'm not CEO, someone else will make decisions about Emma's treatment. Someone who doesn't know her, doesn't care about her. At least this way, I have a chance to fight for her from the inside." Jake's expression softened slightly, but the distance between them felt insurmountable. "And what if you can't? What if the board overrules you anyway?" Victoria had no answer for that. She drove back to Chicago in silence, her mind racing through possible strategies. By the time she reached her penthouse office, she'd made a decision that would either save Emma or destroy everything she'd worked for. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for the next morning, but Victoria spent the night preparing something unprecedented. She called every contact she had in medical research, every pharmaceutical insider who owed her favors. By dawn, she had a plan that was either brilliant or corporate suicide. Emma's condition worsened 3 days later. Victoria was in her Chicago office when Jake's call came through, his voice hollow with panic. She collapsed at school. We're at Children's Hospital in Kansas City. The doctors say she needs surgery immediately, but insurance is stalling on approval for the new treatment protocol. Victoria closed her laptop without saving her work. I'm on my way. Victoria, you don't have to. Yes, I do. She was already grabbing her keys. And Jake? I'm bringing someone with me. 6 hours later, Victoria walked into the children's hospital with Dr. Michael Rodriguez, one of the country's leading pediatric cardiac surgeons and a personal friend since medical school. Jake looked up from Emma's bedside, confusion and hope warring in his expression. Dr. Rodriguez has reviewed Emma's case, Victoria said quietly. He's willing to perform the surgery here, tonight, using the experimental protocol. No insurance approval needed. Jake stood slowly, his eyes moving between Victoria and the renowned surgeon. I can't afford. It's already taken care of, Victoria interrupted. Anonymous donor. Dr. Rodriguez, could you give us a moment? Once they were alone, Jake's composure finally cracked. Why are you doing this? After everything I said to you, after the way I treated you. Because I love her, Victoria said simply. And because I'm falling in love with you. I know I have no right to feel that way after what my company has put you through. But Emma changed something in me that I didn't even know was broken. Jake stepped closer, his hand reaching up to touch her face. Victoria. A nurse burst through the door. Mr. Morrison, we need to prep Emma for surgery now. There's been a complication. The next few hours were the longest of Victoria's life. She and Jake sat in the surgical waiting room, watching the clock tick past midnight. Jake held her hand, and Victoria marveled at how something so simple could feel so profound. Tell me about her mother, Victoria said softly. Jake smiled sadly. Sarah was a teacher, 3rd grade. She used to say that Emma had an old soul, that she understood things other kids didn't. When Sarah was dying, she made me promise that I'd let people help us, that I wouldn't try to do everything alone. He squeezed Victoria's hand. I think she would have liked you. At 3 a.m., Dr. Rodriguez emerged from surgery, his scrub stained, but his expression cautiously optimistic. The surgery went well. Emma's heart is responding beautifully to the new protocol. She's going to need the medication for life, but with proper treatment, she should live normally. Victoria felt her knees go weak with relief, but Jake's face had gone pale. The medication for life, that's the expensive one, isn't it? The one your company makes? Victoria nodded, her mouth suddenly dry. Jake, about that. Her phone rang. Dr. Rodriguez took the call, stepping away to speak in low, urgent tones. When he returned, his face was grim. That was the hospital administrator. Sterling Pharmaceuticals just issued a statement discontinuing the pediatric cardiac protocol, effective immediately. They're citing insufficient market demand. Victoria felt the blood drain from her face. The board had moved without her, cutting off Emma's lifeline while she was focused on the surgery. Jake stared at her in horror. Your own company is condemning my daughter to death, he whispered. Victoria's hands shook as she pulled out her phone and called her assistant. Get me the board, now. Emergency conference call. She looked at Jake, her voice steady despite her panic. This isn't over. The hotel suite conference call was brutal. Victoria's board members appeared on screen from their various locations, their faces showing controlled annoyance at being awakened. Victoria, your absence during this crisis has been noted, said Chairman Edwards. The Millbrook situation has become a public relations nightmare. We're discontinuing the pediatric line to minimize exposure. You can't discontinue Emma's treatment, Victoria said, standing in front of the camera. That medication is the only thing keeping her alive. One patient doesn't justify the risk to our shareholders, board member Patricia Hawkins replied coldly. Your emotional involvement in this case has compromised your judgment. Victoria looked at Jake, who was listening to every word, his daughter's future being decided by people who'd never met her. In that moment, Victoria Sterling, the CEO, died, and someone entirely new was born. Then I resign, Victoria said clearly. Effective immediately. But I'm calling a press conference tomorrow morning, and I'm telling the world exactly what Sterling Pharmaceuticals values more than children's lives. The board erupted in protests, but Victoria was already disconnecting the call. She turned to Jake, who was staring at her with amazement. You just threw away your empire, he said quietly. No, Victoria replied, feeling lighter than she had in years. I just figured out what actually matters. But Emma's weak voice from the doorway changed everything. Miss Victoria? Are you leaving us again? 6 months later, Victoria knelt in the morning sunlight streaming through the converted garage that now served as headquarters for the Emma Morrison Foundation for Pediatric Care. She was wearing jeans and a t-shirt instead of designer suits. Her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail as she sorted through grant applications. The foundation, funded by Victoria's personal fortune after she'd sold her Sterling Pharmaceuticals stock, provided free cardiac medications to children whose families couldn't afford them. Jake had become her co-director, bringing his practical wisdom and community connections to complement her business expertise. Miss Victoria, look what I drew. Emma bounded through the door, healthy and vibrant, carrying a crayon picture of 3 stick figures holding hands under a rainbow. That's you, me, and Daddy. We're a family now, right? Victoria knelt to Emma's level, her heart full to bursting. What do you think, sweetheart? Emma threw her arms around Victoria's neck. I think the CEO thought she could control everything, but the best things happen when you stop trying to control them and just let people love you. Victoria laughed, tears of joy streaming down her face. You're absolutely right. She looked up at Jake, who was watching them with undisguised happiness. The CEO believed she controlled every outcome, until a single father and his daughter taught her that the most important things in life are the ones you never see coming. Jake pulled them both into his arms as golden sunlight filled their small office. Finally, a complete family formed not by corporate strategy or careful planning, but by the simple courage to choose love over control, vulnerability over profit, and connection over the safety of emotional walls.